Welcome everybody for today's webinar. It's the second part of webinar series which we started around about 6 weeks ago. Today we talk about workforce planning and how to overcome common business challenges which companies are facing in this specific area. The main target of today's webinar is really to illustrate and to show you how a pre-built workforce model can work in an organization, and how this model can generate added value in an organization, and how it helps to overcome the common business challenges, which we will explain a bit more in detail later. The two people who are hosting the webinar today is myself, Martin Winkler. I'm the business development leader at QPipe, working for QPipe since January 2015, and prior to that I have worked heavily for 12 years roundabout in different finance and controlling positions, and worked heavily on topics around integrated business planning and reporting.
Hi everyone, myself is Tomer Gans, and I'm the product manager of Apliqo. I've been working for QPipe 2 years now as a product manager, and previous to that I was working in big corporates managing large Team 1 solutions, including workforce and other P&L planning applications.
Good. Regarding today's topic and the agenda which we have prepared, want to quickly show you first of all quickly show you the roadmap of the webinar series. We love to share best practices, and we have a product developed called the Apliqo UPM suite, which I will explain later a bit more in detail. But in this UPM suite, a lot of best practices around integrated planning and reporting are covered. We had the kickoff session 6 weeks ago, where we talked about the general concept of the UPM, the Unified Performance Management solution, and then in every 6 weeks from now onwards, roundabout, we're covering different topics. Today, workforce planning, and then also other best practices around KPI analytics, driver-based planning, scenario modeling, top-down, bottom-up planning, and so on and so forth. And you can sign up on our webpage already now for the webinars, because they are already in stone and the dates are fixed. Therefore, I'm happy if you sign up already now if you're interested in these topics. For today, we mainly focus on this content. First of all, I want to give you a quick background information about the Apliqo UPM and how it sits in the whole organization of QPipe. Then we will talk from a business point of view about workforce planning and the common business challenges other companies are facing. And then a big part of today's session is really a live demo of the product which we have developed, so that you're not seeing only a PowerPoint slide. It's really a live demo. And then we wrap up the session with a summary of the content, and with a Q&A session at the end. Apliqo itself. Apliqo is a product which is part of the QPipe group. QPipe is a consulting company which is focusing on performance management solutions since a long time. We are heavily focusing on the implementation of these solutions based on technology called TM1, which is the technology which sits now at the IBM company. And we are covering the full stack in this area. On the one hand, we have a dedicated development and support team who are doing implementations around the globe. We have an offshore support team in India who is supporting big corporate companies during post go live requirements. We have an own education department due to the fact that we are focused very strongly on this technology. We have our own education department where we run specific training courses for end users, for developers. We host yearly two big conferences in Australia and in Europe for the community, and then also client days in each region around the globe, where we really transfer our knowledge in this specific area to all our customers and interested people. Then we have a dedicated CubeWise Code department. This is our software development team, which are developing a lot of tools and own softwares around the Tier 1 technology. And we share this with the market to really increase the usage and the benefit of this specific technology. And then last but not least, this is the product today, and the topic of today is the Apliqo product, which is a pre-built application and framework for financial and operational performance management. And there are a lot of layers in this UPM suite, which we will discover more in detail at a later stage. Good. Workforce planning. What are the common business challenges that we see in the market? First of all, there are certain. I think it's pretty obvious that in a lot of companies, the workforce accounts for most of the expenses in the operational expense line items. There are certain entities, depending on the industry, where the workforce expenses are generating around about 70 to 80% of the expenses. And this illustrates the fact that it is a massive part of the whole budget process. And if companies are getting this wrong, it can have a material impact on the financial positions of each organization, being the P&L, the balance sheet, and or the cash flow statement. And there are common business challenges which a lot of companies are facing around the globe. And one of it is the disparate data in spreadsheets and different HR and GL systems. These big corporate companies are running on different ERP systems, may have different HR systems in place, and it's for a lot of companies extremely challenging to harmonize these systems and to harmonize the data, and then build a planning layer on top of the available data for this specific area. The next one is limited to almost no detail on employees. In a lot of organizations, it's really challenging to collect all the relevant employee data, master data, which are important to model a proper workforce planning expenses. Basic information about FTE, maybe yearly salary, and so on and so forth. Social tax rates are available, but if it comes to more detailed information about bonus schemes, car allowance, and other important expense line items in the workforce sector, it's for a lot of companies quite challenging to make this information available. The next one is missing transparency on cost item and workforce drivers. This goes in the direction of a lot of companies are also missing analytical layer around the workforce expenses, so that they have difficulty to identify the key drivers of the workforce expenses and use them then also as a driver in the planning cycle. The next one is it's quite challenging that there are different requirements around planning detail by department. Again, a big corporate company or organization, there are certain business units who are requiring detailed bottom-up planning on an FTE level, so that I really plan my 500 or 1,000 or whatever number of FTEs really on FTE level or position level, bottom-up. But there are maybe other business units in the organization or corporate department where this level of detail is not needed, and they want to do a classical driver-based planning concept on account level, on salary account level for this specific business unit. And a modern solution in this area needs to have the ability to cover both. On the one hand, the detailed bottom-up planning, but on the other hand as well, a driver-based planning based on the chart of account of an organization. The next one is calculation complexity increases by adding individual employee measures, and it can get quite complex. If you have different kind of measures, and we see this later in the live demo, position, grade, employee type, all these different kind of measures, and for each measure you may have different kind of assumptions. The calculation logic can be quite complex, and you need to have a proper solution and system in place who is able to perform these kind of calculations. The next one is the mechanism of staff turnover is difficult to plan. Again, in an organization, you have new hires, you have attrition, you have movements, you have in the year movements from one cost center to another, from one company or business unit to another, and you need to have the flexibility and the functionality in a tool to plan these kind of movements quite easily during the planning process. You need to have a harmonized calculation for HR measures for all the social costs, taxes, benefits, bonuses, commissions. It's quite complex, but you need to find a way to really harmonize it. Quite often there is a situation that the CFO sits there, he's comparing total salary costs in the States, in Europe, in Asia or whatever, but the salary costs are calculated in a different way, and then he compares apples with bananas, and a solution really needs to have the ability to harmonize the calculation so that the figure which is analyzed is really reconcilable and comparable. And a very important part is also, or challenging part is also the missing integration of workforce expenses into the financial core model of an organization being the P&L, the balance sheet, and or the cash flow statement. And this is one key functionality of the Apliqo UPM suite, where the companies have really the ability to connect operational planning layers like workforce into the financial core model of an organization, and we will show you an example in the live demo as well. Good, and with a solution like Apliqo UPM, companies can really overcome these business challenges. Let me give you a bit more background about this UPM suite. UPM, Unified Performance Management, is a buzzword. A lot of other companies are using enterprise performance management, corporate performance management, and so on and so forth. And Cubewise is coming around now with unified performance management. But from our perspective, it is really the integration of strategic, financial, and operational plans in an organization, so that you really have the ability in one tool to cover the whole reporting and planning stack of an organization. And as you see in the Apliqo UPM suite, there are sub-products underneath: the strategic performance management, the financial performance management, which is the financial core model, the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement, the operational performance management, where the workforce model sits in, and then last but not least as well, a proper financial consolidation and close solution, which is part of the whole Apliqo UPM performance management suite. Today we will cover and focus on the workforce model. This overview illustrates how the integration works. There is really the financial core model in the center, the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement for reporting, analytics, and planning, and every other pre-built model is already pre-connected into the financial core model, so that at any time when you do changes, you see immediately the impact on the bottom line of all the areas of the financial core model. Last slide before we go into the live demo, just that you have a big picture overview how this works, and it's also the flow which we will present later in the live demo. The first part is really the workforce assumption area. You have the ability in the application to really maintain all the relevant workforce assumptions like annual leave days, daily hours, social tax rates, bonus rates, and so on, cost rates, and so on and so forth, so that there is really a central place to maintain all this kind of information. There is an area where you can set up the workforce account, so that there needs to be a logical flow from all the workforce account measures into the P&L items of the chart of account dimensions, so that at any time when you do changes in the bottom-up model, it will be immediately transferred into the financial core model, so that you can really assure this integrated planning concept. Then you have the ability to plan all existing employees, so that you load data from the source system into an initial month, and from there you can then plan in and out of already existing employees. There is a layer where you can plan completely new employees, new hires, based on different kind of dimensionalities. And yeah, the dimensionalities are giving the companies certain flexibilities. You have the typical dimensions like version, currency, year, month, company, and so on and so forth. But then the concept is to work also with so-called generic business dimensions, so that a company can decide cost center, business unit, profit center is important for me, or from a workforce planning point of view, it's the FTE type, the position itself, the location, and so on and so forth. It's really the flexibility of maintaining these core dimensions based on the company's need. And then when you do this bottom-up planning, there is, as I showed before, an automatic link into the financial core model, so that at any time when you change an assumption, when you change an employee, when you move an employee, and so on and so forth, it immediately calculates on the fly, and the data will automatically transfer into the core model, which makes integration, scenario review, and simulation extremely easy and powerful. That's it for the PowerPoint for now, and I'm happy to hand over to Thomas, and I will be back later.
All right, thanks, Martin. So just going to take the screen now, and we're going to dive deep into the live demo. All right. So, okay. So just as a general comment, if some of you, I know that some of you is the first time you're probably seeing this tool, the UPM solution, and because today's topic is really the workforce planning, I'm going to dive there quite fast. So if you have if you want to see more about the tool or about the full UPM solution, feel free to go to our webinar. And there is a recorded session from Martin about 6 weeks ago, where he covers the whole UPM concept in more detail. But just as a small reminder, I'm just going to go into the integrated planning demo, where where the initial starting point for the whole P&L balance sheet and cash flow starts. So if I'm just going to go directly into the OpEx workforce section. So at the moment we are looking at the Sunny Spain company and a specific cost center, which is the marketing. And this specific cost center, we just have at the moment just a dummy employee with director marketing, and it has, as you can see, some individual costs assigned to that position. However, at the moment there is nothing flying or going into our profit and loss statement, and the reason for that is from a driver-based planning perspective. At the moment, all the accounts related to workforce are set to not forecast. So just as a quick exercise, what I can do. Just 1 second. Sorry. Okay, so the quick exercise, I can just change the forecast method to be full year estimate plus X%, and I can drag this to all the accounts related to workforce. And as you can see, I have those input numbers that have been put in the system before, which gives me a total of 57K, obviously negative amount on the P&L coming from the workforce model. And the moment I do that, you can easily see the impact on the full model. So I can see the impact on P&L on the monthly basis. I can see the balance sheet updated with the exact same amounts, and as well the cash flow, right, with the specific amounts. Now going back into the Apliqo workforce, and what I want to do is to set this account to now be driven from the bottom-up model, which, as you see here, I'm expecting to get an amount, a total amount of 220, almost 220K, because that's the only employee set at that cost center. So now I can just quickly go to the forecast method and change this to be coming fin expense workforce planning, bottom up. And I can also change this to all the other accounts related to workforce. And just like that, I got my full, basically workforce planning for that cost center coming from the bottom-up planning, which is perfectly reconciling with the amounts in the bottom-up planning. Now, it's not only, as you can imagine, the impact is directly have impact on all the models, so as well the P&L, as you can see, with the new amount, the balance sheet, and the cash flow. So the idea here is really that although you can still decide on the company level and at the cost center level individually to each one of those combinations, whether the planning should be sourced based on a high-level driver-based or coming up for the bottom-up planning. So for instance, if you have a cost center who has 200 or 300 employees, which obviously drives a massive cost to the cost center, you would want to do it on a bottom-up in a very detailed way, while in other cost center where the ad count could be very small, like 1 or 2 employees, then it completely doesn't make sense to go to that level. So obviously that's something you can decide on the fly. So we're going to come back to how the workforce integrates with the UPM a bit later, but now I'm going to dive directly in to the workforce planning. So the first thing, as Martin said, we have the assumptions and the account setup that needs to be set on the initial process. So the first thing is the account. If I go into the wizard, which is the assumptions and account setup, I see on the left-hand side my accounts from the original chart of accounts dimension that comes from the ERP system or whatever kind of the original account that you do your P&L and reporting on. And this is how we can map each one of our specific assumptions in the bottom up to a real account in the chart of accounts. So for instance, everything I do on the salary value in the bottom up planning will flow directly to the salaries account number 5010. And at the same time, a simple example, like the training cost at the moment has not been planned in the bottom up, but for any reason, if I want to do planning as well for the training cost on individual level, I just need to create this new workforce account and do the one-time mapping, and the cost will be flowing directly. So that's kind of from that perspective, and as I said, that's a one-time setup normally that you would do, unless of course something changes and you want to update the mapping. Now going to one level deeper, this is where we see the different assumptions that we have chosen to present today. So just to simplify the model, we just chose like the top 4 or 5 different drivers that impact the cost, the total cost of an employee. But of course, if there's anything else which is missing here and is relevant for your company, whether it's a pension or a car allowance or any specific individual allowance that are relevant for you, it could be easily added and integrated into the model. Now, at the next, so just to review, at the moment we're going to look at the social taxes, on costs, provision bonus, the salary increase. Normally, a lot of companies have a kind of formal process of a yearly increase for all the employees, and other allowances that can be done on a number basis. So, to each one of those accounts, I can actually decide what drives or what are the different drivers for that specific assumption. So, for instance, the social tax rate is driven mainly or only by the location. So, each country normally has a specific percentage where each employee has to pay his social taxes to the state, and it's driven by country. So if there are a few employees of the same company or cost center from multiple locations, I can just individually set the location, the tax rate to each one of the locations. Now, on-cost rate has the same logic, but you can see that, for instance, if you look into the bonus percentage, then on this specific assumption, we want to go a bit more detail and go to a company and role level. And so each one of the roles could have a different entitlement for a bonus percentage, right? And of course, we can use any one of those combinations. Now, let's say after you define what are the main drivers and how you want to maintain those inputs by, we can go into the next step, and this is where you can actually make the inputs that drive the calculation afterwards in the workforce planning. So, for instance, what we can see here is that we have for each one of the office of the location, we can set a yearly amount, a total year entry amount that will drive all the months. So, in most of the cases, social taxes are a fixed amount per month. But for some reason, if in a specific country there is kind of a change, and in a certain amount, in a certain month, the social taxes are being raised to a different amount, you can just delete the yearly amount and then maintain the social taxes by individual months, right? So again, you have the full flexibility to manage those costs, and we will see in a minute how it actually impacts the calculation. Then if I'm just going to look at the on-cost percentage, then it's going to look very similar to the social taxes because it's done with the same granularity. But if I'm just going to go into provision bonus percentage, and we know that often the yearly bonuses for the employees are being paid in 1 month from a cash flow perspective. This is our approach here for the bonus provision is because it's a bit unknown, and obviously it's a bit speculation. We accrue it to the different months, but of course, if you have a specific logic that needs to be done, we can also accommodate to that. So in this one, I can actually see all the different companies along the different positions that I want to entitle a bonus, and you can always use the search box to search for a specific position, so I can look at all the directors and see that they all at the moment have a flat rate of 5%. Another interesting kind of topic, which I think is as well very common in a lot of the companies, is the yearly salary increase. So a lot of companies have this process that to match the inflation, they have a salary increase to all the employees, kind of a fixed amount in a certain month, that the yearly base salary would be increased in a certain percentages for the rest of the year. And of course, all the other calculations like the on-cost tax, the social taxes, the bonuses should be driven from that salary increase. So this is again how we can maintain it per company and location, for instance. And last but not least, we also have the possibility to maintain allowances on a position level and location combination, but on the difference here that it's done not by percentages of the salary, but really a total yearly amount. So this is just an example of a placeholder of a general allowance, but it just to emphasize you can also do allowances by amount and not only percentages. Okay, so now diving into the next step, and we're going to open the main planning template where the HR representatives would come and make most of the input and the maintenance for the plan scenario. So just to explain a little bit what we are seeing here. We have here the filter bar where we can see now we're selecting a specific company and we're doing it on a specific cost center. And of course, if I change the cost center, I would immediately see all the positions which are relevant for that cost center with the relevant employees. So I'm just going to switch back to my administration. And then another thing that we have here, we can also toggle between an existing position and new position, which I'm going to show a bit more in a few minutes. Then if we're looking here at the columns, the first columns on the tablet, so the first one we have the employee name, then we have the position, location, and the employee status. So again, this is just in our specific example. As Martin said before, we have the concept of the 4 generic HR business dimensions that could be defined to each organization based on their need. In our specific example, we have chosen 3, and we left the 4th one out. And the 3 we have chosen that are driving most of our costs are the positions, the location. So again, the assumption is that under one cost center and company, we can have employees in multiple locations, and the employment status, whether it's a full-time or a part-time employee. So those are our 3 main HR business dimensions that could be then be accommodated to each company differently. Then moving forward, we see here that we have the starting period and end period to the employee. We have a possibility to maintain comments like any free text. Then we have the yearly base salary, which is the main driver for all the calculations that exist in the workforce planning. We can also maintain the FTE percentage. So if the employee is only 50%, then all the costs would be obviously calculated to half, and 80% would be to 80%, et cetera, et cetera. And now when we're getting into the interesting part where we have the total cost for the employees, and we see first all the costs and then the breakdown to each one of our assumptions that we have, like the salary, social taxes, on cost, bonus, and allowances, right? And just to review it in a bit more of a detail, I'm just going to click here on the adjustment and overview button on next to, next to Joseph employee, right? So I'm just going to click on the chart, and what I will get here is a high level overview of the employee, but this time with the month phasing, right? So I can first see that the outcome is being calculated to the full 12 months. I can see as well the FTE. I can see the yearly salary, which is being calculated. And if you remember our screen before, we had the yearly salary increase, which we put to 20% for that specific position. And therefore, you can see that automatically the salary jump between February at the total amount, which are being basically changed between February and March, right? So it's not just the salary, it's each one of the other accounts, which are being calculated as well. And then we get our total for the year, which has all the costs based on the different calculations. What's also important to see that our total year salary for the year is always be updated with the latest figure, including the latest raises or amendments. So when you go to the next year cycle, this will be captured as the initial base salary, right? Now, a few adjustments we can make on employee level. Just a couple of examples. So let's say if we know that the employee or that position is supposed to get a salary increase of 20 grand on a year basis, right? So I could just put it under June, and immediately you see that the yearly base salary has been updated to 116K, and as well, all the monthly cost has been increased accordingly, right? So this is really convenient in terms that you have any changes, you just need to do a one-time input in a specific month, and immediately all the other costs are calculated on the fly. Another thing we can do here is that, let's say if you have those specific exceptions in the environment where an employee is entitled for a very specific benefit, like a scholarship or child allowances in a specific case, or moving an apartment, you can just kind of put a plug into the plan, and let's say if he's entitled to 50 grand entitlement right here, I can just put it as a one-time, and it will update the total cost for the July month. But as you can see, all the other accounts related to salary remain untouched. So it's really kind of a one-time on top of all the other benefits. Another thing we can do here, so is now if we're just going to look one more deeper on those two columns. So if we're looking at the same adjusted employee, I can, let's say this position, I know that it actually ends on May for some reason, because it could be that the person has left, or maybe the position has been terminated. And once I do that, we would see automatically, if we go here again and display the adjustment and overview, we would see that automatically all the costs are being cut off and not calculated into the total cost after April, right? With the sole exception of personal allowances, because if you did a personal allowance to the person, it could be paid even regardless if he left the organization, right? So again, every change you do on the end of the starting period would impact directly on the total cost, right? So just another example, it will, if I can go here and Laura and make her terminate in July, the amounts will automatically be calculated, and you see I immediately went to 50% of the amount. Now, another kind of very common scenario that is that you would do in a workforce planning is creating new positions which were not initially part of the workforce. So in order to do that, we have two possibilities. So we have an option to add a single position, which I'm just going to demonstrate very quickly. So I can select a starting period, so let's say on May, and it's going to be a full-time on, let's say, on a specific location, and the role would be, let's look for, we want to recruit somebody for administration, so product delivery administrator, and the employee name would be new employee, because I'm not actually sure who is going to be recruited for that position. I can give a yearly salary amount of, let's say, not to be too generous, so give 80 grand, and the FTE would be 1, because it's 100%. So once I do that and I click on OK, I get a position, basically I get a notification that new position has been created. And now if I switch into the new position, I toggle into the new position section, I see that I have my new product delivery administrator put into the plan with a starting period of May and the yearly base salary of 80 grand, and I can see immediately all the total cost that, sorry, if I'm just going to look at the adjustment and overview on that employee, I would see immediately that at the beginning of May, based on the yearly salary of 80 grand, all the costs are being calculated, including the salary and the social taxes, the own costs, and all the different HR assumptions. All right, so it's quite powerful in terms that the only, although it's a bottom-up planning and very detailed, it's still very driver-based planning, and the only thing, the main driver that drives the whole thing is the yearly base salary, which could be normally be identified very clearly and easily, unlike the other assumptions which are normally hard to get from the source HR systems. So I'm just going to switch back again to our existing positions and just to show a couple of more functionalities that we have. So another option that we have, so if we don't want to use the, let's say we have a position that we know that's completely going to be terminated for the next year plan, it should not be added to the cost at all. I can just quickly go and basically inactive the specific position, and what will happen is that the cost for that position will immediately be taken off the plan. And if I look at the overview on the adjustment level for that position, I would see still that obviously the yearly salary per head count is still in, but the head count and all the other relevant measures are completely wiped out because this is an inactive position. And of course, if anything changes, I can always take the inactive and the position would fly into the cost. Now, just to show you again really how intuitive and how straightforward it is, I would open the magnify the chart, the adjustment and overview plan for Chris under Singapore and under that position. And I'm now just going to go and try maybe to change the social taxes percentages so we can see how it really flies without any other maintenance into the plan. So just to make it a bit more simple, I'm going to have it in a different tab so we don't need to leave the page. And I'm going to go into the social taxes percentage. And here we're looking at, again, Singapore, which is the driver for our own cost for the social taxes rates, right? And I will go to Singapore, and instead of using now the monthly spreading, I'm just going to put 15% on a yearly basis, right? So now all the months immediately has been updated to 15%. And now if I'm going to go back to my adjustment and overview pop-up and just click on the refresh, we will see that from 400, the social taxes just rippled to 1,200 to all the months. Now, obviously, this is just an overview of this crease, but the social taxes inputs were done to all the positions which are part of Singapore. So automatically, in just one driver, the social taxes for all those employees has been now reflecting a 15% social taxes input. And at the same time, of course, each one of those other assumptions could be done at the same way. Now, another very common exercise or common task is to, when you have an employee or a position moving to a different place in the organization, right? So, for instance, if we're just going to drive now, if we're going to go into IT, or doesn't matter, I can go into even sales or any other cost center, and I'm going to try maybe to move Dragon into a different position in the organization. So this time I can click on the move position icon, and I will get this form that then first I see the current company, the current employee, the current location, the current position, and I can now move this person. For instance, so I would like to keep him in the same company and also in the same cost center, so also in sales, but is actually going to be placed in Geneva with effective movement months will be July, and he's going to move in with a 100K salary. So I can click on Move Employee. I get a notification that the employee has been moved. And if I'm now just going to refresh the page, I would see immediately that I have the dragon has been basically terminated and appeared from a sales coordinator group and has been moved to a new position beginning of July. And you see immediately all the costs fly in immediately to the total cost center with all the different assumptions that are relevant for that position and that location, right? So again, very kind of a complex task that could be done very easily and automated all the process. Now we're running a bit out of time, so there is also an option to create bulk of positions. So if for some reason you don't want to do like a one-by-one position, and you know that there are 10 or 15 positions with the same place that needs to be done, you can also do it with a bulk position. So that's another thing you can do. And just to show one more thing, there is also the position review by company. So if I'm just going to open this view for a one single company, I will now get all the different cost centers, employees, and position, which are currently planned with obviously all the costs and the exact and a very similar layout. And I can now even export this whole thing to Excel. Where the moment it loads, I would get, just going to make it a bit more visible, you see that now we get for all the cost centers, employees, and positions, all the amounts and the relevant costs for that, right? So you can now take this and make further analysis. Now, just to show you, again, the full picture, and as I said, coming back to the full UPM picture, if I'm just going to go into my main dashboard, and I'm going to dive in now to Australia Pacific, to sunny Australia, sunny Central Europe, which was the cost center I was mainly making my changes, and I would even choose the specific administration cost center, department which is relevant. And now the view would be refreshed, and you can see that for all the relevant accounts which are relevant to workforce, like the salary and the social security, they're all coming from so the expense workforce planning, and you see the full amount flying in to the P&L, right? So that without any need to run any process or to make any change, the moment you kind of fix that relationship between the accounts to be driven from the bottom-up planning, every change you are making in the bottom-up will immediately impact your P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow statements. I think that was the main topics I wanted to show you today. We also have some other reports that enable us to analyze headcounts, differences and costs between different versions. And of course, if you're interested to see that, please let us know. I'm going to give back the control to Martin, and he will take us back to his presentation. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are back. Thank you very much, Thomas. Good time management. We have now 10 more minutes left. I want to take 5 minutes of it to quickly recap it a little bit and put it into context what we have seen in the live demo and the slides before, and then 5 minutes Q&A session. When we talk about a summary of the slides which you have seen before and the live demo, there are, as we described, there are different business challenges in a lot of companies when it comes to workforce planning. And there are certain success factors, the Apliqo product, which you have seen before, is able with all the pre-built stuff to overcome most of these business challenges. When we summarize this, one of the key success factors is really to build a trusted information hub where you can establish a central database for actual and planning workforce data. And when we take this into context of the solution, which we have shown, is really there is a pre-built load process included and a central database, which is the TM1 technology, which is used from a lot of companies around the globe to do this kind of planning and reporting requirements. There is a key success factor also to have the expense analytical layer, so that you really have the ability to identify workforce expenses as key drivers of your business. Are they generating 60, 70, 80 or whatever kind of percentage rate of the total operational expenses? And when this is done, it's pretty obvious, or when this is the case, it's pretty obvious that it's an important part of your planning process. With the pre-built analytical metrics, which comes with the solution, empowers companies really to identify this and then build a planning layer on top of it. HR assumptions is absolutely key factor. You need to have a central place where you can maintain HR assumptions to really automate the calculation of the workforce costs. It's extremely important that you have this layer so that when you change one of the drivers, like Thomas has shown before, that you see immediately the impact on the P&L. And then also, this is something what we covered in the first webinar, also the impact on the balance sheet and the cash flow statement. And this comes with the pre-built assumption layer and the calculation logic, which sits in the Apliqo model. The flexibility when it comes to the level of plan detail, as I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint slide, when you have a big corporate company, there are certain requirements. Some of them want to really have detailed bottom-up planning on a workforce level. Others just want to use the driver-based planning concept, which is also part of the Apliqo FPM model for certain cost centers or business unit combinations. But a solution, a best practice solution, really needs to have the flexibility to cover both. The next one is existing and new employees. You need to have the flexibility to load all the already existing employees which are on the payroll on the last month before the planning cycle starts. And then you need to have an easy functionality to plan new employees. And you have the ability there with the pre-built data load of existing employees, and then with the functionality Thomas has shown with the new employees. Employee movement, quite important again in bigger organizations to swap one employee from one cost center to another, from one business unit to another profit center, company, and so on and so forth. You really need to have the flexibility to do this and to make sure that the data are still consistent and flying into the financial core model. The calculations, you really need to harmonize complex calculation logic for various measures. As I said earlier, it's quite challenging for a lot of companies to really have all the regions on the same calculation logic. So when they then compare the data, that they really compare it's based on the same basic calculation. And this is assured in the solution with the pre-built, on the one hand with the pre-built calculation logic, and then with the TM1 engine in the background, which allows really to do even more complex calculations or change calculations or adapt it to companies' needs. Sensitivity analysis is extremely important. I think this is a big benefit of integrated planning solutions. We really can change one of the drivers, and you see immediately the impact on the bottom line with the on-the-fly calculation. And then what we have also illustrated is really the integrated business planning concept, where you can connect operational bottom-up models, in this case the workforce model, into the financial core model, and this is fully covered with the pre-built unified performance management approach, which we have in the application. Good. How could a UPM roadmap look like in certain organizations? And typically, this is a starting point for a lot of companies of sometimes a long journey. What we typically do is we kick off these sessions if companies are interested in these business topics with a webinar, with a live demo, one-to-one session, so that they get a first impression of the business challenges and how the Apliqo UPM can overcome these challenges. And then the next steps are typically more detailed sessions with the companies where we talk about the requirements more in detail, discover the requirements. What we typically do is a 2 to 3 day on-site workshop with the prospects where we really go through in detail the pre-built functionalities which are part of the UPM suite, and then we do a gap analysis, how big the fit is to the pre-built solution, and then based on this we have a pretty good idea of potential implementation time and a fit level of the solution. And that's it for now from the slides which we have prepared and the live demo. As I said earlier, the last minutes are open for questions, and I'm currently checking the questions which were asked or submitted to us. And let me wait some more seconds, and then I will cover some of them. Okay, let me start with the first one. The first question is, we talk about a pre-built solution, but how customizable is a pre-built solution? That's a good question. It comes up very often when we talk about this product. It's extremely flexible. The key message here is it allows companies really to start at a high level and use a lot of business best practices which are part of the application. But then we have a concept there in the whole model of fixed business dimensions, which a lot of companies are obviously always need when it comes to planning, like company, currency, version, and so on and so forth. But then we follow the concept of generic business dimensions, so that companies really have the flexibility to decide if they want to plan on cost center, business unit, profit center, and when it comes to the HR dimension, position type, position itself, location, and so on. So really a full flexibility to cater for this. The next one is, how easy is it to add or change any calculation logic? I have to say pretty flexible. The background of the product is IBM TM1 technology, which is well known for the modeling benefits for a lot of companies. And at any time we can customize the already pre-built calculation logics which are part of the application, or we can add completely new calculation logics to the model. And with the technology in the background, we have there extreme flexibility. There was one who watched really carefully. When Thomas exported to Excel, he saw there the local currency. And the question is if the planning model only works in local currency, or if they can also plan in transactional currency. It's both possible. A lot of companies are planning in local currency, which is the currency of each specific legal entity. And this was how we have demoed the product today. But obviously, a lot of other companies are also having the requirement of doing the planning in transactional currency. And we can fulfill both of the requirements. Good. We are done now. Let me wait a little bit more. Okay. I think that's it for today. I really want to say thank you at the end that you attended the webinar. We have recorded the session, and later today or tomorrow we will send out the recorded version, including the PowerPoint slides, so that you have this as a reference point. As I mentioned earlier, it's a starting point of a long journey of our webinar series. The next one is in round about 6 to 8 weeks, and you can watch it on our webpage, and you can already register for it. And feel free to ask any questions. Afterwards, you have our contact details, and we are happy to stay in contact and have a more detailed one-to-one session with everybody from this today's webinar. Enjoy the time, and see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.